A massive high-tech city towers over the slums as the sun begins to set. Down in the streets, everyone, masked up and moving through the crowded city center. Sunny holds onto a cup of real coffee, a luxury he never could have afforded back in the slums. Sunless, or Sunny as he's usually called, has spent every last cent he had on this, and he's not exactly thrilled about it. Looking like he hasn't slept in days, he just hopes the stuff is actually worth the price. He takes a sip, and immediately spits it right back out. It's incredibly bitter. Sunny's feeling completely ripped off. He stares at his reflection in the cup, wishing he'd just bought a piece of meat instead. But since he's already paid, he chugs the rest. Hopping the caffeine will keep him awake. He sets the empty cup down on the bench. He tosses the paper cup toward the bin, but it clips the rim with a thud and bounces onto the floor. Sunny reaches down to pick up his trash. He drops it into the bin and moves on. He starts walking again, his feet dragging with every step. He slaps himself to try and stay alert, but the exhaustion is winning. He staggers through the crowd, desperate to make it to the police station before he collapses. He finally sees the entrance and tells himself to just keep holding on. The precinct is a sleek, high-tech fortress compared to the rest of the neighborhood. Inside, things seem normal enough as officers work at their stations. A police officer notices the messy kid walking up and looks a bit confused. He asks if Sunny is lost, but the boy stays silent for a moment. Sunny finally speaks up, turning himself in as a carrier of the nightmare spell. The officer nearly jumps out of his chair in shock. The station goes into an immediate, code black, lockdown as alarms start screaming. Sunny stares ahead with bloodshot eyes, fully aware that he's now one of the infected. This curse, the nightmare spell, first showed up decades ago. It looked like a simple sleeping sickness at first, but people realized it was a global threat when the victims wouldn't wake up. Doctors couldn't do anything. It wasn't a disease, it was something more like magic. The real horror started when those who died in their sleep transformed into monsters. These things were called nightmare creatures, and they started hunting humans everywhere. The military tried to fight back with everything they had. But even heavy tanks and missiles were useless against them. The world was quickly swallowed by total chaos and despair. While the world burned, some of the infected remained in their deep slumber. Eventually, their eyes snapped open. These people hadn't turned into monsters. They'd actually survived the nightmare trial. They woke up as the awakened, survivors of the nightmare. They returned with incredible magical powers they'd gained during the trial. With these new abilities, they were finally able to push the monsters back and restore some peace. These awakened became humanity's only hope for survival. They established themselves as the world's new guardians, creating a whole new order. To prepare for the inevitable, schools started teaching kids combat skills as soon as they could hold a wooden sword. The rich spent even more, dumping fortunes into special training to make sure their children came back as awakened. Kids born into powerful awakened families had an even bigger leg up, inheriting magical memories and echoes. But that world of privilege had nothing to do with Sunny, a kid who grew up as nothing more than a slum rat. He knows that for someone with his background, being chosen by the spell is just a fancy name for a death sentence. In the high-security section of the precinct, the air is thick with tension as the clock ticks down. Guards stand at the ready in the northern quadrant siege capital, knowing a potential disaster is sitting right inside. Strapped into a heavy interrogation chair, Sunny faces the officer who starts with a simple question. "What's your name?" Sunny looks like he's about to collapse as he answers, "Sunless, but everyone just calls me Sunny." The officer thinks it's a weird name, but Sunny explains he was born during a solar eclipse. His mom had a poetic soul. The officer offers to contact his family, but Sunny tells him flat out that there's no one left to call. He's already starting to nod off, admitting he can't fight the sleep for much longer. Realizing time is tight, the officer leans in and asks how much Sunny actually knows about what's coming. Sunny knows the basics: kill monsters in a place called the Dream Realm. If you survive that first nightmare, you get magical powers and return to the real world as an awakened hero. The officer tells him to listen carefully, because there are details the general public doesn't know. He warns Sonny that he'll see more than just monsters in the nightmare. He'll see people who feel real but aren't. Sonny's eyes narrow as he asks how the officer could possibly know what's inside someone else's dream. The officer just tells him to treat everyone as an illusion, even if he has to kill them to survive. He tells Sonny that as soon as he lands, he needs to check his status screen for his attributes and his aspect. Getting a combat aspect like a swordsman or an archer would be the jackpot, making his life a whole lot easier. But even if he gets a support role, the officer tells him not to give up, since no aspect is truly useless. He points out that the spell sets up trials, not executions, so survival is always possible. Everything Sonny does during the trial will determine the rewards and powers he brings back to reality. Then the officer's face goes grim as he lays out the stakes for the people outside the dream. If Sonny dies in there, his physical body becomes a gate that lets a monster crawl directly into the real world. He literally begs Sunless not to die, or at least to survive long enough for backup to arrive. It takes hours for an awakened to get to the precinct, and the regular cops really don't want to fight a monster themselves. Those were the last things Sonny heard before his eyes finally drifted into sleep.